Okay, we have all our board members present, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Is that okay, Dr. Pearson? Yes? Okay. I'm not sure. I think our staff is on, but maybe not visible, or they might not be on yet. So it is 7:05. Thank you, public, for holding in. We needed just a quick break after that meeting. It was very productive. Thank you for that, business service crew. It is 7:05 p.m. on May 26th, 2020. I am calling to order the special meeting of the school board, virtual board meeting via Zoom. Can we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to
Your public.
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry about that. I wasn't sure if y'all were going to join me or not, but I guess not.
Ms. Waibel,
Yes.
just a quick point of order. You need to call the meeting to order with a roll call.
Oh, sorry. May I have a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Mrs. Barker.
Here.
Mr. Bryant.
Here.
Mrs. Faircreek.
Here.
Mr. Manheim.
Here.
Mrs. McCabe.
Here.
Mr. McNally.
Here.
Ms. Waibel.
Here. All right, that's a new one. I don't think I've ever done that before. I think Zoom is getting to us. All right, now that we've done all that and we did the pledge out of order, do we have any citizens' comments for this meeting?
There are no citizen comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, so for action today, we have on the agenda the new elementary day, as well as the curriculum associates, the iReady. This is in your packet. We have discussed this at several meetings. Let's put it on for motion. So may I have a motion for the new elementary day, please?
So moved.
Who was that?
Becky.
Ms. McCabe. Sorry. And second?
Second.
Mr. Manheim, thank you. Okay, so for discussion, this is in your packet. We've talked about it several times. But Jason, Dr. Pearson, do you want to give us a quick overview of what we're reviewing yet again this evening?
Sure. So you're reviewing the interim plan that was presented at Learning and Teaching last week for the longer elementary day. Of course, this is a one-year interim plan for next school year. It's not the full implementation, which is what we're hoping for the 21-22 school year. But for next year, we were able to make some changes and adjustments. The presentation is in your packet. I think some of the considerations that we put in place as we thought about next year's school year for the longer elementary day was the question as to whether or not we would return to in-person learning at the beginning of the school year or somewhere after the school year starts, and ensuring that the staff that we hired and the programming and support that we provide to students addresses some of the learning loss issues that we anticipate will occur with our elementary children, as well as also maximize our staff efficiency and support. So we looked at having some of our staff work with other grade level staff in a remote setting. And then once, of course, we are able to implement fully a longer elementary day with our students, shifting over to the Empower curriculum and program. Also a part of this plan, our LRC directors have stepped up and expressed willingness to take on a class section each week at each grade level. And at first, as students transition back to a full in-person day, the LRC directors will be helping support literacy instruction, and the Empower teachers will be helping to support math instruction. So those are some of the key components. And of course, we are recommending that you approve this, this change.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson. Also today we have with us Mr. Blomquist and Mrs. Geyer. Should you have any questions you want to ask again at today's meeting regarding the elementary day, as Dr. Pearson did highlight from our original discussion regarding our elementary day, we have changed quite a few things around because of COVID. in regards not only to FTE, but in regards to what our teachers that will be present starting in the fall will be focusing on. If we should not start in person, but start in e-learning, everyone will have a different focus. So those that will be hiring right away for the Empower will be focusing on that recovery, as well as when we do start in person, our specials will then come in at that point, if you recall from your material, just to clarify that point. So I don't know if there was anything else that needed clarifying, Mr. Blomquist or Mrs. Geyer. Okay. Does the team
I don't think we have anything else.
Okay, all right, thank you. Does the team have any questions they'd like to ask at this time?
I have a couple.
Sure.
Thank you for clarifying about the specials. I think we got a little confused with what the 18.5 FTE meant and what the 5 to 7 teachers. So thank you for clarifying that and making it clear that if we start remotely, we will not have all of the additional art, music, and PE that this plan includes. So I just want to double check and make sure it's really clear. If we were to start the school year face to face, everybody's in, COVID's been demolished and wiped off the earth, we have enough money in our operating budget to do this interim or the full day or the full new elementary day. Is that accurate? I don't even know who to look at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Dr. Chapman
yes.
will probably jump
Dr.
in here.
Chapman.
Yes, that's accurate. Correct.
All right, so we have the money.
If I can clarify, I believe in your report, you said that we would probably that we would end up at a surplus still at the end of the year of a minimal amount.
At the end of fiscal year 20, we're projecting a surplus, correct?
Yeah, okay.
So if we don't start face to face and we don't have the extra PE, art, and music, what's the plan for hiring people once school has started?
Well, presumably we'd have some advance notice on when school would resume in person, more than hopefully a
48
few
hours.
days. So we would follow our regular process. We would post and interview and hire. We had art, music, and PE positions posted already and just have not been hiring from that. So we have a pool already. There are other districts that have put in hiring freezes. I'm not sure that those are going to stick until school starts, but they do exist. So that it won't be the same as hiring people in April, but I am sure we'll have a pool of teachers to draw from.
So you're not concerned, to Mrs. McCabe's point, good point, you're not concerned, Mr. Moore, about a shortage of teachers for specials, if we're hiring later?
Well, we're not going to have 100 applicants per position like we might have now, but I'm sure we'll find people to fill the jobs. We will also be able to tap, there may be interested retirees and so on. Just in the education bill that passed the legislature on Friday or Saturday, they extended again, retirees can work 120 days instead of 100. So presuming the governor signs that, then that gives us a little leeway for using interested retired teachers too.
Okay, great, thank you.
But
Wait,
then
Mrs. McCabe, sorry, Mrs. McCabe, you said you had another question, or was
Yeah,
that
I
it?
have at least two more, Mr. McCabe.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
And I will be quiet.
No worries.
So one of the things that I would like to at least make sure that is stated is that our elementary teachers do an amazing job and did an amazing job this year. And that going into the fall, they still have quite a bit of content that they need to do, as well as I'm expecting we're going to have a lot of assessment that needs to happen, not just to hit targets, but to be sure that we know where the gaps are that kids have, so we can make sure that we're instructing. So the 5 to 7 teachers who have been earmarked for Empower, will be supporting this work. Could you just real briefly explain why that might really assist the learning for kids, and maybe close some of the gaps that all districts are going to experience?
I'll start and anyone else can pop in that has anything else to add. I think that as we know, when you think about assessment, even with our youngest students and everything, it takes more people, it takes more time. So I think for us to be able to have these additional people that will be trained on an assessment tool to use and to be able to support the teachers in doing that. But you can assess, but then there's the plans to carry out. So assessment does us no good unless we have a plan of support for the students. So we have this extra group of individuals that doesn't only look at academics, but also can look at social emotional and can look at executive functioning. You know, what we're reading and what we're seeing out there too is, yes, we do have to, of course, worry about gaps in their learning, but we also know when they come back to school that we're also going to have to, especially for our young ones, really look at how do we engage them in a group again? How do we help them be able to work side by side with a friend? How do we help them set goals, whether they're remote learning or at home? So I think we have some flexibility in how we can look at a child to see what is the need, whether it's taking and putting some plans in for their academics, or if it's for social emotional, or if it's just to learn a new skill set. So there's that additional people to support that. And as I think you said, Mrs. McCabe, our elementary teachers have a lot of content that they address, you know, every single day, and to have this other resource that can help them alongside our ISCs and our reading specialists and math specialists. We do have support, but it's another layer that can help with the remote learning plans, can help with the synchronous learning and that, because we know how important that is. So I think there's many different gaps that this role can fill.
I would much rather invest in teachers with kids than anything else. The research is pretty clear about that. So I think it's a really great use of the teachers to have them support. Another question I have is, why not wait until the ISB guidance comes out? I think it's coming out on Friday. Should the board vote today to pass it, will we have a lot of changes coming up on from ISB?
Yeah, so I don't think any of the plans that will come out from ISB will necessarily change our implementation plan for the fall. I mean, we're already planning for kind of 3 different contingencies and have plans for these staff members, you know, along all 3 of those plans, whether it be remote learning, whether it be a partial day or blended learning, or be a full day, everybody comes back to school. I think it's critical that we identify these staff members as soon as possible. They have quite a bit of work to do over the summer as they begin to help plan and think about the implementation for the fall. We can use their help now, and we have a plan to use them in all the settings. So from that standpoint, I think it would be important for us to go ahead and move forward, which is one of the reasons why we scheduled this meeting now on this special on May 26th, so that we could get these people identified and hired.
Okay.
Right.
I have one last, oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think Dr. Pearson hit on, I just wanted to reiterate, he said these empowered teachers are really going to help under all 3 types of scenarios. So the fact that we can get them in place and get them thinking about those different scenarios, we will be ready to hit the ground running when we come back.
Okay, great, thank you. Last question. What if we postpone for a year? What kind of consequences do we have?
I'm going to let Mr. Moore talk about it. I think one of the big things is just from a contractual standpoint, and Mr. Moore.
Well, I think really that may result in a change to the contract, or at least some portion of the contract, which would go down the labor law path of changes to wages, hours, or terms and conditions of employment, which then gives the association the right to demand a bargain. I wouldn't at all want to predict what could then happen, because that would be in the court of the association. But you as a board bargained the existence of the longer day into the contract. So changing it from existing to not existing, I think may lead to the association choosing to demand that we bargain with them the impact of that.
Okay.
Mr. Moore, could you expand on what portion of the contract would possibly be we would not be in compliance with if we were not to move forward?
Well, I mean, there's certainly a number. There's the professional day language. There's the school start and end time language. There's the change in workday language. And I could give you section numbers by looking them up, but these are roughly the titles. And anything else that the association feels is impacted. I mean, that would really be up to them to decide because it would be them demanding to bargain. We don't demand to bargain our changes. I think that's a short list, and I certainly don't want to discuss specifics of bargaining or bargaining strategy in an open meeting. But I think that's my short answer.
Okay.
And that is also part of the reason why I am silent on this question.
Okay, Mr. McNally, I want to circle back to you. Thank you, Mrs. McCabe, for your questions. And thank you, gentlemen, for your answers. Mr. McNally, did any of those questions answer any of the questions you were going to ask, or do you have?
No, I was just really going to make a point based upon something that was hit upon with the first question, which was regarding hiring personnel essentially after the school year. And I'm always in favor of hiring teachers or whomever before the school year starts, because that's when you get the greatest pool of qualified and high quality applicants. This year is a slight exception to that, just in that I think every school district has been hit with the same externalities that we are here. So it may not look quite the same as in typical years. So I don't know if that makes sense going back 4 questions, but I just wanted to make that point that I think we are more likely than in other years to find quality applicants at a later point than we would, in typical year.
I appreciate that insight. Thank you very much for sharing. All right, do any of the other board members have questions? Mr. Bryant, do you feel like your questions were answered, or did you have any more you wanted to expand on?
I'd be interested to get some feedback from the board, and maybe even possibly make a motion to suspend this vote until we conferred with our legal counsel about any impact it would have on the contract. So.
Okay, sorry, I just turned my mic off. Is there any interest on the table for a motion for that in that regard?
I would support Mr. Bryant and his request.
All right, then I guess I would like to make a motion to suspend the vote on this until we can talk to legal counsel.
Okay, and Ms. Fairgrave?
I second the motion.
Okay, so Mrs. Rashford, can we have a roll call for this particular motion?
I think you need to allow discussion on this motion before you do.
I do, okay. Sorry.
I was just going to say we need to have discussion before we do that, and I would like to hear from the relevant parties before I vote on the matter. So
the floor is open to Mr. Bryant and Mrs. Fairgrave and your concerns.
I think it would be smart. For me, I would like some more information from legal before I can make an informed decision on if we are not in compliance with the contract, and what would be the implications of that if we were to vote this down.
From my standpoint, to add on to that, to be clear, I definitely am in support of having the extended day for elementary. I get concerned as it relates to the timing of that. I appreciate that we will not be at a financial deficit at the end of 2020. But what I think there's a big unknown as to what additional expense we're going to incur to be able to get our students back in school. So I think that's a consideration. And then also I'm concerned about the timing. I appreciate we're not anticipating that there's a lot of concerns that will come out of the IESB guidance. But to me, I mean, we're talking about a week difference. So that's another factor.
Okay, I'm going to share my opinion. I hear the concerns. I certainly think that COVID has been unpredictable and untimely and unfortunate. And what I believe the board agreed were their goals when we sat down and did collective bargaining. And Mr. Moore, let me know if I start walking a delicate line, please. I think it was something that this board decided and agreed upon, that this extra long day, more learning for our students, was a high priority of the board. I wish we had a crystal ball 2 years ago and known that certainly COVID was going to hit. That being said, I think it's important for us to keep our commitment to what we believe is important in learning for our students and for our teachers, and the direction we want this district to go, to be innovative and have that the goal to bring additional aspects to our kids. And in this regard, we're doing a great marriage of both. We're bringing on staff that will help identify where our inequities are with our students, and there's going to be some, no doubt. Just seeing what I've seen personally over the last 12 weeks, that we're going to have kids come back, that some will be advanced and some will be behind, and we're going to need staff to help us navigate that. So I think this is a marriage of the two, especially this very first year while we figure it out. So that's just my opinion. I don't know if there are any other board members want to chime in with their opinions.
I totally agree with you, Mrs. Waibel, that this is a commitment and an agreement that we made. I think the association and the administration has done a great job at looking at it for next year. I think we will provide our kids with some opportunities that we couldn't have done without what's going on. If we're doing remote learning, we're not adding 40 more minutes to any child's day. That is not what we're about. We're about giving the kids what the guidance requires. But we will have the opportunity to close those gaps. So I agree with Mrs. Waibel. I think we need to, we made a commitment, and this is a value that we set as a board that we have. So I will not vote for this amendment.
I will say that there's some pieces that I do understand and agree. There's, deferring for a week isn't changing anything, so to say. Although I will say that the SEA worked very hard on this interim plan, and I think that it supports that the core instruction, and I would be concerned about not just the legal pieces of the contract, but because there's potential ability to work through or around that, I would be worried about the ramifications of us going back on what we agreed we valued, and we worked very hard to make sure that happened, and the SEA came to accept that and then went forward and made this happen so that we could vote on it. I would be concerned about the ramifications of that.
I'll jump in here. I'd kind of like to hear from our district administration, how they feel about first of all, the impact of waiting that extra week to 10 days to kind of vet this with attorneys. Do you see a need, and is there a value in that? And kind of how do you view that?
So I guess there's a couple of pieces here. Number one, I feel like that the plan that we have worked hard to put in place related to this interim plan responded to many of the concerns that you as a board raised as we started to discuss the elementary day. We put in place many of the things that you raised as issues. And so, I feel like that the association and the administration worked to try to address those concerns and still maintain the integrity of what we were hoping to accomplish with our students in the coming school year, with the additional caveat of trying to address some of the learning loss questions that are coming up related to what may happen with the instructional gap. I feel like that there's flexibility in the plan. I feel like that it is conservative in the way that we're going to implement it so that we're able to save as much money as possible in the process, but still ensure that students and teachers have what they need for the coming school year. That being said, there's no guarantee that the guidance that we're going to receive from the state next week is going to necessarily help make our decision related to this particular program. I think what I've mentioned already is that we do have a contingency for kind of all three scenarios in light of the longer elementary day. And I would just be concerned that we would postpone and then still not have any additional information. We've not, as information has been rolled out related to COVID-19 response in schools, it hasn't always been timely from the state, and I'm not certain that it's going to begin to be something that's provided in a timely manner. So I would have concerns waiting for that fact. I think what Mr. Moore told you related to the contract is true. I've had an opportunity to talk with our attorney. I know that Mr. Moore has as well. And in the context of the things that are in the contract that could be up for discussion, I think we've identified those for you this evening. I don't know that we would have any additional guidance from him related to that until we were to have maybe a demand for bargain from the association.
That's
that's kind of the district perspective. Of course, we're going to support whatever the board wants to do. I also think we need to double check the motion that you have on the table, because I'm not sure that there is a motion to suspend. So Mr. Moore is going to talk to that.
Okay, so I did some very quick reading of Robert's rules. You have Mr. Bryan as the motion maker. You have two options here. You can postpone to the next meeting, which in your case is June 8th, or you can move to postpone indefinitely. And the practical effect of postponing indefinitely is that the motion is never revisited. So motion to postpone indefinitely is essentially waving away the motion. The alternative is to postpone to the next regular meeting where you can take action on things.
I'd like this. So I need to make a new motion then?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to suspend until the next board meeting.
So postpone until June 8th?
Correct.
I would second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore, for checking on our Robert's rules.
And this vote does require a straight majority, just like a normal vote.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for looking into that.
And Ms. Waibel, can I ask a follow-up question to Dr. Pearson at this time? Okay.
Yeah.
So
We're still in discussion. We just had to clarify.
Okay. It's come up a couple times, at least in whether it's be business services or this meeting, about the multiple plans that the district leadership is coming together with. And I think that's great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm just interested in when any of those thoughts, even conceptually, are going to be shared with the board.
So I think that I've shared that we are hoping to put together a committee, a reopen D303 committee, that's going to consider the various aspects of this plan. So health and safety, transportation, instructional day, and also by level. So there will be some stakeholder groups that are going to look at some of the caveats. I think the piece that we need to have in place are the non-negotiables, you know, as far as what's discretionary and what's not, from the state's from the state's perspective about reopening school. So that we're hoping that once we have that information that we will have those groups together, and as we work through some of those issues, we'll be updating the board regularly on the progress.
So we should definitely be hearing something from those groups, even if it's preliminary, at some point in June.
I would say towards the end of June would probably be reasonable. And then again, of course, there's going to be additional guidance coming from the state in July as well.
Right. Thank you.
And Dr. Pearson, are you planning to use CAC in any of that?
Yes, we're going to ask CAC members to serve on some of these committees.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore, for clarifying. Does anyone else have any comments or questions or discussion to the current motion, which is to postpone until the next board meeting?
Well, again, I'm interested in hearing, the two things I'm interested in hearing is first, how much of a negative impact the administration feels there would be by postponing until that point. If there's minimal impact, or if there's, you know, if it would be a major impact, and frankly, how the association feels about it. And I'm not sure if Mr. Blomquist is completely prepared to answer that, but I'll throw it out there and he can answer as he wishes.
So I do want to say from the individual staff perspective, I can tell you that some of these teachers who are in limbo are going through a tremendous amount of stress right now. They kind of, you know, extended, you know, stuck their neck out to join in this endeavor. In some cases, they have been hesitant to share with their current colleagues that they might be moving into this endeavor of being an Empower teacher. And so we kind of told them hold off, and we gave them this plan B, and they were on board and excited about the opportunity, and anxious to find out what they are going to be doing. It is already, the end of the school year has already happened, so they already don't have that sense of closure if they are moving into that new position, and so it's already a stressful point. And so to extend that another couple of weeks is going to take a toll on some of our staff members. As far as the association's position on this Plan B, we are supportive of this Plan B because we believe it honors the commitments so that we can reach we can eventually in 2021 achieve the full plan that was agreed upon between the school board and the association last year, and that is why we are supportive of this Plan B.
So the members are supportive of this?
Yes, they are.
I think another aspect that postponing it does is we begin professional learning. So we know that we're getting ready for 3 different options that could happen, how we start school next year or what the school year looks like. And we have a course ready to go and to start. And we want the teachers that would be moving into the Empower positions to take that. You know, I think it starts maybe the week of the 11th, somewhere in there. And so it's just getting close, that we want to make sure that we can offer that and they get that professional learning so they can start planning with us. So I think that's another impact. It's an important impact when we want to have quality of work going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Geyer. I appreciate everyone's discussion points and bringing this up. I think at this time, if there's nothing further, I'd like to go to Mrs. Ratchford for the roll on this particular motion.
Yes, so you're voting only on the motion to postpone to
Until
June 8th.
June 8th, correct.
Right. Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim,
No.
Mrs. McCabe,
No.
Mr. McNally,
No.
Mrs. Barker,
No.
Ms. Waibel.
No. Okay, the motion to postpone to June 8th fails 2-5. So we're going to go back to the original motion, which was for the new elementary day program. Is there any other discussion? And Mr. Moore, parliamentarian, if I'm out of step in any way, please let me know.
No, you're exactly right. It's back to discussion on the main motion.
Okay, so if I'm going back to discussion on the main motion for the new elementary day. So do we have any further discussion on this? And I appreciate that we went through the discussion and vetted multiple options. So thank you, board, for participating in that. Does anyone else have any other comments they want to talk about before we go to roll call vote on this? Okay, I'm going through. I see no hands up. All right, thank you very much. Mrs. Redford, the roll, please.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
No.
Mr. Mannheim,
Yeah.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
No.
Ms. Waibel.
Yes. Motion passes 5-2. Okay, thank you so much again for that participation, board and staff. We appreciate you answering our questions. It's a very obviously heavy decision for us. This is not an easy spot we're in financially, as well as with the COVID stress. So we appreciate everyone's position, staff, student, board member, and teacher. So thank you, everyone. Now we know where we're going forward to. Okay, may I have a motion for B, Curriculum Associates, the iReady assessment?
So moved.
Mr. McNally, thank you. Second.
Second.
Mr. Mannheim, thank you. So do we have discussion on this instrument that we'll be using for assessment coming back from COVID, potentially back from COVID? In one scenario, we'll eventually be using it to assess where there might be areas that we need to help our students. And we'll just get an idea of where our students are. And I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in and give a bigger explanation, but we've been through this quite a bit. Anybody? No? Mrs. Barker or Mr. McNally? No, you're good.
I was trying to unmute. Right. So this is not just an assessment that will replace some of the other assessments that we do, but it is an assessment then that leads to intervention and potentially enrichment. So it has some dynamic qualities in it that we don't currently have in our assessments.
I was actually, I was debating whether or not I was going to give a recap or if I was going to ask Ms. Geyer to kind of put her on the spot a bit, because I think she can speak more readily to it than I can.
Okay, Ms. Geyer, is there anything we forgot that you want to jump in on?
I think that Mrs. Barker did a really nice job of, and Mr. Shazar, you pop in whenever you want. Really nice job of, it is a diagnostic assessment, so it lets us know where kids are at, and then it does provide an individualized plan. I think when we look for innovative learning and we look for personalized, this is a tool that helps us develop personalized plans. What I really like about it, it's not just a computer-based, it has the teacher as part of it too. The teacher provides them with plans to deliver lessons also.
The one part of it that I kind of wanted to highlight, I guess, is this is something that is kind of a running assessment. In other words, it's not something where we're hitting one point in time. This is something that kind of works to keep the assessment going with each student in a better way than we have.
Right, so you have the diagnostic 3 times a year, but there's also a monthly update so that you can really be able to get up-to-date feedback on the students in order to adjust the plans.
And just if there's anything else to add, one thing it does tie together about 3 other programs. When we talk about a single place to go or log in or continuity of not only the assessment with the services and the remediation and the extension, it's one program that's able to do all of that. So that also fits another need that we've been hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trezor and Mrs. Geyer. Does the board have any other discussion on this? I know we've talked about it a bit before we ask for a roll call. No, doesn't look that way. Okay, Mrs. Redford, the roll, please.
Mr. Manheim,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Ms. Waibel.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're about to move into motion to appoint President Pro Tem. Before I do that, I just want to say I think we've accomplished a lot this year. We've accomplished some of our goals. As we moved our district ahead, we haven't accomplished everything we wanted to do. We certainly have a lot of work ahead in our future to be the highest functioning board that we want to be. As I mentioned, this is not for the faint of heart. We have many serious issues: educational inequities, food insecurities, social emotional needs, substance abuse, academic performance. And that was all before COVID hit. And now we have COVID. And we have a whole different learning experience that we are navigating through. These all became magnified, and then add life or death safety of our students and staff. And things became very difficult. So I appreciate everyone's dedication, the year we've had, and what we've accomplished. I think it's something you can be proud of. I know this board will rise to the challenge to continue to strive and improve in the next and upcoming year. So now saying that, I'd like to ask for a motion to appoint President Pro Tem Chris Ratchford.
I'd like to move to appoint Chris Ratchford President Pro Tem.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Ratchford, is the roll? Okay.
Yep. Mrs. McCabe.
It's gonna be a little tricky for us, sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Manheim,
Yes.
Ms. Waibel.
Yes. Mrs. Ratchford, take it away.
All right. Well, next we will have a motion in a second and then a roll call vote to adjourn sine die. And then after that, we'll open up the nominations for board president. After he or she is chosen as president, then they will take over the meeting. So do I have a motion to adjourn sine die?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Second, Ms. Waibel?
Yeah, I get to second something.
Yes. All right, and now the roll. Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Manheim,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Ms. Waibel.
Yes.
And just so you know, I'm staying in just the alpha order as we go forward through the meeting.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to open nominations now for board president. Is there a nomination?
I would like to actually nominate myself for consideration for the president role. And I am sure this is very atypical for the process. The reason that I chose this approach is because I really wanted to minimize politicking and putting undue burden on my board colleagues. With that said, I have communicated with each of you, so you are aware that I was going to throw my hat in. And that's it.
Thank you. So we have one nomination for Mrs. Faircreek.
I would like to
I
nominate.
would like to nominate Nick Manheim.
So I'm going with Mr. McNally now. Mr. McNally nominates Mr. Manheim. Is there another nomination for board president?
I'd like to nominate Carolyn Waibel.
Are there any other nominations?
Well, actually, thank you, Ms. Barker, for the nomination. At this time, I'd like to decline the nomination. I believe it's important for us to have continuity in our group, and we're going into a very important time, and I'd like us to have the most experienced leader at the helm. And so Mr. McNally beat me to it, but I was going to nominate Mr. Manheim. And so thank you, Ms. Barker, for your support. And at this time, I'd like to decline the nomination.
All right, then I would like to confirm that we have two nominations, Mrs. Fairgrieve and Mr. Manheim for board president. Thank you, Ms. Waibel. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the roll. When I call your name, tell me who you vote for president. Mrs. Barker.
Mr. Manheim.
Mr. Bryant.
Mrs. Fairgrieve.
Mrs. Fairgrieve.
Heidi Fairgrieve.
Mr. Manheim.
Nick Manheim.
Mrs. McCabe.
Mrs. Fairgrieve.
Mr. McNally.
Mr. Manheim.
Ms. Waibel.
All right, Mr. Manheim.
Thank you. Well, then I show that Mr. Manheim has 4 votes for president and Mrs. Fairgrieve has 3. And now I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Manheim. Congratulations, Mr. Manheim.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. All right, continuing along on our election of board officers, do I have a nomination for board vice president?
I would like to nominate Carolyn Waibel.
Are there any other nominations for board vice president?
I would like to nominate Becky McCabe.
Are there any other board nominations for vice president? Not hearing any. Ms. Rashford, will you take roll?
Okay, once again, as I go through the roll, please just indicate your vote for vice president. Mr. Bryant.
Carolyn Waibel.
Mrs. Fairgrieve.
Ms. McCabe.
Mr. Manheim.
Ms. Waibel.
Mrs. McCabe.
Mrs. McCabe.
Mr. McNally.
Mrs. McCabe.
Mrs. Barker.
Mrs. Waibel.
And despite the fact that I said I was going to go in order, I apologize. Ms. Waibel.
Carolyn Waibel.
All right, that is 4 votes for Ms. Waibel.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Do I have a nomination for board secretary?
Julian Barker.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for board secretary? Not hearing any. Ms. Rushford?
Sure. Mrs. Fairgrave.
Mrs. Barker.
Mr. Manheim.
Mrs. Barker?
Mrs. McCabe.
Mrs. Barker.
Mr. McNally.
Not the toughest one to decide for the night, Mrs. Barker.
Ms. Waibel.
Mrs. Barker.
Mrs. Barker.
Mrs. Barker, I guess.
And Mr. Bryant.
Mrs. Barker.
All right, thank you. That would bring us to our last, which is also another obvious one we have. I would like to nominate Dr. Chapman to be the treasurer.
Second. Oh, we don't need a second on that, do we?
No.
We're just voting. I'm sorry.
Do I have to ask if there's any other nominations?
Oh, no.
Are there any other? All right, not seeing any. So, Ms. Ratchford, you take roll for treasurer.
Of course. Mr. Manheim.
Dr. Chapman.
Mrs. McCabe.
Dr. Chapman.
Mr. McNally.
Dr. Chapman.
Ms. Waibel.
Dr. Chapman.
Mrs. Barker.
Dr. Chapman.
Mr. Bryant.
Dr. Chapman.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Dr. Chapman.
All right.
All right. Then, thank you everyone for the election to board officers. That takes us to our item number 7, which is a motion to adjourn to closed session by roll call vote for the purpose of 1, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bryant, second. Ms. Rashford, roll.
Mrs. McCabe.
Yes.
Mr. McNally.
Yes.
Ms. Waibel.
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Yes.
Mr. Bryant.
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes.
Mr. Manheim.
Yes. So we're just waiting for Mr. McNally.
Are we live streaming?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna leave my video off for a minute.
Give Mr. McNally a second here and see. Hey, Mr. McNally, all right.
All right, I think I hit the wrong button. Oops.
So we are back in open session. Ms. Bradford, will you take a roll?
Ms. Waibel,
Here.
Mrs. Barker,
Here.
Mr. Bryant,
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
Mr. Mannheim.
Here. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bryant. Ms. Bradford?
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Waibel,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim.
Yes. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Everyone.
At all.